light by which we view the world, and so we'll explore everything, from abortion to Hollywood, and from the First Amendment to the United Nations, and everything in between. Following St. Paul, we're seeking transformation through the renewing of our minds.
Cresta in the Afternoon with Al Cresta.
Heard right here on Domestic Church Media, weeknights at 5. This is WFJS 1260 AM Trenton, WFJS 89.3 FM Freehold, WGYM 1580 AM Hamilton, and WSMJ 91.9 FM North Wildwood, Cape May. Communicating hope on Domestic Church Catholic Radio. Welcome back, friends. Another big hour of Friday Live on this September 10th, 2021. And, of course, tomorrow we remember 20 years ago the terrorist attacks on our country and the World Trade Center, Pentagon, Shanksville, and, of course, our guest coming up this hour, Deacon Stephen Kern, is going to tell us his experience because he was in one of the towers when the plane hit. And he obviously escaped, but he'll tell us his experience that day, to just get it firsthand from someone who was there, who lived through it.
Mm-hmm. And they say, the people that were there, that it's so vivid as if it were still yesterday or last week or even last year, that those visions are just encrypted on the brain, and you can't even get it out of your mind.
And I guess there were people... you couldn't get out of Manhattan. You were pretty much stuck. I know there were boats coming across the harbor, picking people up, just private boats. People just with their private boats coming over and getting people and taking them back over to Jersey.
Right, just creating their own little ferry line, or otherwise they were walking over the Brooklyn Bridge or all the.
But they probably couldn't go through the tunnels though to get to Jersey.
No, everything was shut.
Yeah.
Couldn't get in or out.
No, it was a horrible day. I think we still have downstairs. I keep stuff. I have the newspapers, the headlines the next day.
Yeah, that would be something.
Our worst day. It's downstairs on the Daily News or something.
I know we have pictures of the children. As you said, we were on Riverside Drive there on the west side.
Mm-hmm. No, on the Jersey side.
On the Jersey side. And they stood there and looking with the towers behind and the smoke that lasted for days and days and days and weeks on end.
Yeah. So anyway, Deacon Stephen will be with us in just a little bit to tell us about his experience that day. But first, we're going to have our gospel for the 24th Sunday in Ordinary Time, and our reflection today is by Dr. Scott Hahn. So here is our reflection for the 24th Sunday in Ordinary Time.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus and his disciples set out for the villages of Caesarea Philippi. Along the way, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" They said in reply, "John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." And he asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter said to him in reply, "You are the Christ." Then he warned them not to tell anyone about him. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed and rise after 3 days. He spoke this openly. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. At this, he turned around and said, looking at his disciples, rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do." He summoned the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and that of the gospel will save it." The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
You are the Messiah, Peter tells Jesus in this Sunday's gospel. But Peter was never expecting a Messiah who would have to suffer and die. What about our expectations? Are we making Peter's mistake? How do we take up our cross and follow our Lord, losing our lives in order to save them? That's up next on Breaking the Bread. In this week's gospel, we reach a pivotal moment in our walk with the Lord. After weeks of listening to his words and witnessing his deeds, along with the disciples, we're asked to decide who Jesus truly is. Peter answers for them and for us as well when he declares, "You are the Messiah." Many expected the Messiah to be a miracle worker who would vanquish Israel's foes and restore the political kingdom of David. Jesus this week reveals a different portrait. He calls himself the Son of Man, evoking the royal figure that the prophet Daniel saw in his heavenly visions. But Jesus' kingship is not to be of this world, a political kingdom, and the path to his throne, as he reveals, is by way of suffering and death. Jesus identifies the Messiah with the suffering servant that Isaiah foretells in this Sunday's first reading. The words of Isaiah's servant are Jesus' words, as he gives himself to be shamed and beaten, trusting that God will be his help. We hear our Lord's voice again in the psalm for this week, as he gives thanks that God has freed him from the cords of death. As Jesus tells us, to believe that he is the Messiah is to follow his way of self-denial, losing our lives to save them in order to rise with him to new life. Our faith, we hear again in this week's epistle, must express itself in works of love. Notice that Jesus questions the apostles along the way. They are on the way to Jerusalem, where the Lord will lay down his life. We too are on a journey with the Lord. We must take up our cross each day, giving to others and enduring all of our trials for his sake and for the sake of the gospel. Our lives must be an offering of thanksgiving for the new life he has given us, until that day when we reach our destination and walk before the Lord in the land of the living. This is Scott Hahn for Breaking the Bread.
Breaking the Bread is a production of the St. Paul Center for Biblical Theology. If you'd like to receive written copies of Dr. Hahn's reflections on the Sunday Mass readings, you can contact us by email at staff@salvationhistory.com or call us at 740-264-9535. That's 740-264-9535.
Come, Lord Jesus, come. Come and fill my heart with your life. Hold me close, Lord, hold me tight. And come, Lord Jesus, come. Come, Lord Jesus, come. Come and fill my heart with your life. Hold me close, Lord, hold me tight. And come, Lord Jesus, come. Where there's despair in life, Lord, let me be your voice of hope. Where there's injury, Lord, let me be your voice of peace. Come, Lord Jesus, come. Come and fill my heart with your life. Hold me close, Lord, hold me tight. Come, Lord Jesus, come. Where there is sadness, let me be your comfort and your joy. Where there's fear in our hearts, let me be a sign of faith. Come, Lord Jesus, come. Come and fill my heart with your life. Hold me close, Lord, hold me tight. Come, Lord Jesus, come.
Well, welcome back, and in just a little bit, we're going to be joined by Deacon Stephen Kern on this eve of the anniversary of the 20th anniversary of the terrorist attacks on this country, and specifically today, we'll talk about the attack on the World Trade Center. Deacon Stephen was in the World Trade Center on that day when the plane hit, and he'll tell us his story.
And he was also there at the prior bombing.
He was there in
90
1993 when they bombed the World Trade Center.
That one, I don't have as much of a vivid memory.
No, the children were literally, we weren't watching a lot of news then. So
No, my head was in the children game.
I remember it, but I don't remember. It was in the basement area, the parking
Like the
area,
parking
I think,
garage.
yeah, of the trade, one of the buildings. But he'll tell us about that as well. So, but we
But
did.
the one thing that comes out of that, and like we said, but people are yearning for that feeling of American patriotism and dedication to all those that are around us, in our home, in our community, and across state lines, that we want that feeling. And that was a time when people just really rose to the occasion, and they came from all over the country and just showed up. What can we do? Give me a helmet. Give me a set of gloves.
Right.
What can I do? And we see that on a smaller scale. And for those that affected this Ida storm, it was not a small scale. I mean, Manville was underwater. There were parts of Bridgewater. The stadium where the Yankees.
Yeah, the AA team up in Somerset was flooded, completely flooded.
But people just jumped to it, and they're going to have games this weekend. I mean, and they were like a big crock pot of soup, that place.
Yeah.
And so along those lines, this does bring out the good in people. In Bridgewater, there's a church, St. Bernard's of Clairvaux, right there. It's almost like in the middle of the highway. What is that, 22?
22 is divided, like the north and south, but there's like an island in the middle.
Yeah, a
Goes
big
around,
island.
yeah.
But there it is, the church and the school.
There's also a
and
diner up there.
there's a couple diners. Anyway, if I could read this, I want to thank Joe for sharing this with us and bringing it to my attention. I mean, there's a lot of efforts out there, and right away everybody says, what can I do? And there's so many stories, whether you watch on the news or in your local paper, of how you can help somebody, and there are many people in need. So this is St. Bernard's saying, our neighbors at Sacred Heart Parish in Manville are in great need of volunteers to help with cleanup following the tropical storm. If you and your loved ones, you and your friends are able to volunteer, that would be tomorrow, 9/11. They're going to start at 9 a.m., and it's an excellent opportunity to help the many neighbors in great need following this horrific, devastating storm. It's a great opportunity for high school students and eighth graders to participate in a work of mercy alongside a parent or their family. So they are asking, I'm going to give you an email here, and I'm sure you could go online as well. Everything's always posted on parish websites. They're asking, let us know your name and how many could potentially be attending to help. And I'm sure they'll draft a list of things to do. It's iHeart, the letter I, HART, at stbernardbridgewater.org. And Saint is just ST, not spelled out. iHeart at stbernardbridgewater.org. And a wonderful way for the whole family to get involved. And I'm sure there's moving branches, and I just can't even imagine. We didn't see anything like that in our neighborhood.
I guess we really don't realize how blessed we were, because at home we had nothing. We had the rain,
Right.
but we had no damage in any way.
And I have a 45-minute commute up to Flemington. The church itself, that proper and little campus that we have, was untouched. But the commute was impossible. I literally could not get there the next day because I had to go through some of these horrible sections that were just lower ground, and roads were closed. Route 29 along the river closed. 31 near Pennington closed. That West Trenton, Linville Road, Harborton Road, all that was shut down until literally 24 hours later, when you could maybe get by on one lane. And there were intersections there at 202 and 31 approaching Flemington, literally up to your shoulders in water. So
and here too, I mean, we have a lot of trees, and
we didn't have even branches.
There was
down.
not even a branch in the driveway. I mean, so we thank the Lord for that protection because we didn't lose power.
No.
We have a backup generator just in case, but I could tell we didn't lose power even. So
Yeah.
we were very blessed here at the Apostolate as well. But the surrounding areas, like I said, last night I was watching the news, and I saw one of the Ewing Township officers that was, I guess, the what do they call the cam thing he has in.
Oh, right, the camera.
yeah.
Body cam.
Body cam, and he it showed his saving this older woman from the floodwaters. I don't know where they were. It just said Ewing, but I don't know where in Ewing they were. But I guess it was bad, obviously in parts even of Ewing.
Yeah. Well, all you need is a dip in the road. I mean, it's not perfectly flat around here, and you go through a neighborhood where it's lower, and that's where all the water would
Now, I
gush.
drove home that day. That was. I remember leaving here after I did my program, and I drove home. It was maybe 5:30, and I went on the interstate. I didn't go Route 1.
Mm-hmm.
I went on 95 or 295 because I figured that would have been because Route 1 does puddle.
Yes.
It dips, and I figured
You go
it's
through
raining.
water.
There might be delays in that. So I didn't go there. I don't know what that was like. I went on 295, and there were no issues at all. Just a lot of rain going that way across the river, into Yardley and that part of where we live. But
I bet there was flooding because you think of that. There's an overpass, and when you go under that, and Trent, the city of you're going south, and the city of Trent, the small city, is on your right.
Yeah.
You know how that really goes very low.
yes,
And then they said, I'm going into Philadelphia, the Vine Street Expressway.
so that was like a canal.
15 feet of water for
I
a
know.
couple of days. I
Crazy.
mean, that doesn't dry up that quickly when it's that deep.
And our daughter, who lives in Astoria in Queens, in a basement apartment, I mean, she really was very blessed as well because there were people in that same area who drowned because the basement filled up so fast. Now, she got water
Right.
in the basement, but it was, maybe an inch or so, nothing to the extent that some of her very close neighbors got.
Really, it was devastating.
Went
And the
through.
thing was, it was midnight, 2 a.m.
Right.
You're asleep. You don't realize how the water's
Sure,
rising.
you're not thinking that, yeah.
Can't
Well-
even think about it.
Yeah, but we will take a break, and when we come back, we're going to be joined by Deacon Stephen Kern, who's going to tell us about his experience on 9/11. He was actually in one of the towers when one of the planes hit. So stay where you are for a very compelling story from Deacon Stephen Kern. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
If tomorrow all the things were gone, I'd work for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. Thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA. There's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
Well, welcome back, friends. Again, thank you for being here with us on this lovely Friday. Of course, tomorrow, the 20th anniversary of the World Trade Center attacks. Very, very horrible situation that occurred. I think all of us can remember where we were when we found out about it, and certainly our next guest can tell us where he was. And I'm going to let Cheryl do the introduction because he's a good friend of hers and a deacon in the Diocese of Metuchen.
That's right. Deacon Stephen Kern has been a deacon since 2010 and has been assigned since then to St. Magdalene de Pazzi Parish, where I work in Flemington. He's also, not too long ago, named the director of the Office of the Diaconate for the Diocese of Metuchen. Hello, Deacon Stephen. How are you?
Hi, I'm very good. Cheryl, Jim, thanks very much.
Thanks for joining us, and we are honored and blessed that you are here because you have a very special connection to the towers, not only working in New York and New Jersey, and you were in the law department, specifically in the North Tower, as an attorney. And then that was the agency, as you were chief of the claims division, that agency also built and owned the World Trade Center. So you had a deeper connection than a lot of the people there. And then, of course, you were in the North Tower, I suppose, when everything unfolded. So, I mean, I know a little bit of the story, but Jim does not. And, of course, our listeners perhaps do not. What was it like, your own personal experience?
Yeah, well, actually, I had also been in my office for the bombing of the Trade Center 8.5 years earlier. Mm-hmm. So, it was a unique place to work, and of course, as we saw 20 years ago and 28.5 years ago, it was also kind of a target for certain people.
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago, on 9/11, I was in my office at that time. We were on the 62nd floor of the southeast corner of the North Tower, and I had 9 people who worked for me were in at 8:46 in the morning, and at 8:46 there was a loud bang and a crash, and the building started shaking violently. We didn't see what had happened. The plane had hit actually the north face of the tower, so we didn't see it coming. Not that that would have done us any good if we had seen it, but all we knew was that the building was shaking violently. When it stopped shaking, which seemed to take like 20 or 30 seconds, I yelled to everybody to get out into the hallway and start going down the nearest staircase. I knew that the 10 of us would not be able to stay together as a group, because as soon as you opened the door to the stairwell, there were already tons of people coming in, flooding into it from all the floors above us. So I decided to stand at the entrance to the stairwell at the doorway and count. And my intent was to count the 9 people who were working there and make sure that they got down. And I had no idea how serious this was, but if the building shook like it did, and having been through the bombing 8.5 years earlier, I knew that it certainly could be serious. And in this way, I thought if I got out and if I saw all 9 of them go down the stairs before me, I could make the assumption that they got out. So I did that, and I was there for several minutes, and it started getting to the point where I thought maybe I ought to go down the stairs, but I wasn't sure if I had seen all 9 of them in the confusion of what was going on. So I knew I'd seen at least 8, but I wasn't sure about all 9 of them, so I decided to go back into our offices and search each cubicle and office and the file room and whatnot and just make sure. So I was about halfway through our offices, and when I got to my secretary's office, her name was Rose, and when I walked into Rose's office and looked around, and not only had Rose not left, but she was actually on her knees underneath her desk. And one of the images that's kind of burned into my brain from that day is of when our eyes met, and she looked at me with eyes, the size of, it seemed to be the size of saucers, and said to me, "It's an earthquake." I said, "Rose, I don't know what it is, but look outside your window. There's hunks of wreckage and glass and concrete and whatever coming down from somewhere above us. Something happened above where we are. And not only that, I really don't think it's that important what happened at the moment. I really think we just need to get out of here." So I convinced her and grabbed her hand, and she came out from under the desk and then went down the stairs. Again, in the interest of your time, I'm leaving out a lot of detail. I will tell you that the evacuation was much quicker than it had been for the bombing 8.5 years earlier. In 1993, on the day of the bombing, it took me 3.5 hours to get out of the building.
Wow.
This time, it took 50 minutes, 50 minutes, to get from the 62nd floor down to ground level.
I can't
We slowed
imagine.
down.
I'm sorry. I can't imagine running that number of steps and against throngs of people.
Well, there was no running going on, believe me.
Yeah.
And that was part of the problem in 1993 when it took so long to get out. There was actually a lot of times when you were just stopped, not moving at all, just stopped in the stairwell. But yeah, there was not much running. But again, it did move much quicker this time. One thing you need to tell people 20 years later. People say, "Well, didn't you know what happened?" Well, no, we didn't, because we didn't have smartphones back then.
That's true.
We had mobile phones that did one thing. They made phone calls, and most of those were not working. But we did have little pager devices. I don't know if you remember those things that had little yellow text messages on them.
Right.
And the problem was they weren't in real time, so there was a delay.
Okay.
So we did find out about 15 minutes into the trip down the stairs that a plane had hit the building. But the reaction in the stairwell was kind of puzzlement. It's like people are scratching their heads. How do you miss something that's 110 stories tall?
Right.
And everybody's assuming it's an accident.
Yeah.
So then in real time, of course, 17 minutes after our building was hit, the other plane from Boston smashed into the South Tower. And then, again, there was a delay of another 10 minutes or so, and we're trying to get down the stairs. And somebody got a text message that a plane hit the other building, and now the reaction in the stairwell was very different.
Yes, that this was no accident.
You could hear people gasping and catching their breath, and some people actually started crying because now everybody was realizing that we were under attack. There was no accident involved here.
Sure.
We slowed down a little at about the 20th floor. The stairwells were only wide enough for 2 people. And at the 20th floor, we saw our first firefighter going up to try and get people out of the building while we were going down. So the rest of the trip was single file because now Port Authority Police, we have our own police force, and firefighters were coming up the other side trying to get people out of the building. Finally got down to the plaza level and looked out on the plaza, which was a wonderful place to meet people for lunch and, see they'd have like a dance troupe or something when nice weather, but it didn't look anything like that. When I looked out in the plaza, it looked like what one of our other docents from the 9/11 Tribute Museum where I work as a docent, another docent from there who saw a lot of combat action in Vietnam described the scene as looking exactly like a war zone. Just, fires and bodies and wreckage and glass, and it was just awful. Rather than leave, I went downstairs. Now, the Trade Center we jokingly referred to as the Trade Center's basement actually had 6 levels below ground. It was actually 6 stories below ground.
Mm.
And the first story was taken up mostly by a shopping mall at that time. And in that shopping area is where the Port Authority's police headquarters were. So I decided rather than leave the area, I would go down to the police headquarters, see if I could help out and find out what was going on. When I got there, there were about 5 guys, a skeleton crew, because most of our guys were in the building trying to get people out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there for about 10 minutes. This is now at 9:59 in the morning. I was there for about 10 minutes, and suddenly there was a huge roar, which is very hard to describe, but I stole the description. One of our other docents called it like rolling thunder times 20.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And the ceiling tiles where we were started falling on us. Even though we were a level below ground, where we were shaking. Mm. We ran. Of course, I happened to be in the back of the offices. We ran towards the exit, but it was blocked by debris. And so we wound up doing what Rose had done an hour and a quarter earlier. We all dove underneath desks or got under door jams, hoping that that was going to protect us from whatever this was.
Right.
Now, we had no idea what was going on, but what was happening was the South Tower was collapsing. Mm. Even though it was the second one hit, it was the first one to come down. Mm. This time, when the shaking stopped and I realized I was still alive, I needed to kind of figure out my second escape of the morning. This time, we had some advantages being in the police area. One of the guys grabbed this huge axe that he used to pry open the door so we could get outside. It was one of the biggest disadvantage right now was you could hardly see. With the dust and the debris in the air, you could hardly see about 3 feet in front of you. We stopped this was something I remembered from the bombing 8 years earlier. I told everybody to stop at the water cooler, which sounds kind of silly, given the, emergency nature. Yep. But if you think for a minute of what's in the air when a 110-story building collapses, it's silicone and asbestos and pulverized glass and pulverized concrete and all sorts of things that are not good for human lungs. Mm-hmm. And in fact, hundreds of people have died in the 20 years since then because of terrible respiratory diseases that they contracted from being exposed either that day or in the recovery period afterwards. So we learned, again, at the bombing 8 years earlier, find a water source, get out a handkerchief, take off your shirt, even grab copy paper from the copy machine, anything that absorbs water.
Right.
Go soak it and put it up against your mouth so you had kind of a crude filter against all the garbage that was in the air. So we did all that. Again, I'm sorry if I'm trying to keep track of your time here.
No, that's okay.
We got out into the hallway, made our way to, the far northeast corner of the site, which was at that time a Borders bookstore. We used the axe to get into the store, walked through, and finally got out to the street at the corner of Church and Vesey. And I started walking northeast towards New York City Hall, and I walked 2 blocks before I could see the sky. Wow. That's how big the debris cloud was that I was in the middle of.
Wow.
When I looked over my shoulder, when I could see the sky, I saw my tower still standing with a huge multi-storied hole in it, hot flames and fire and smoke coming out of it. And then I looked to my left, where I should have seen the South Tower, but all I saw was empty sky. And so for the first time, I realized what must have happened while I was underground. But I didn't have time to think about it too much because I desperately, now that I was out and I was still alive, I needed to find a phone so I could get a hold of my wife, Rosemary, who, of course, has her own story to tell of her morning, that morning.
I bet. I think, you tell her that sometime we'll have her on, too, because from a different perspective, right?
Yep, exactly, yep. As it turns out, when I'm leaving out a lot of stuff, but when they got home, Rosemary and the three kids. We had two kids at Immaculata High School at the time, and one in grammar school. My oldest daughter manned the landline phone that we had, and my wife took the cell phone that we had, the mobile phone. And it seemed like everybody I'd ever met in my life was calling, and she kept saying, "I can't talk to you. I need to keep the line open in case he is alive."
Yes.
And in fact, we joked that when I finally got through to her, she almost hung up on me.
What took you so long?
Yeah, at least I think she's joking anyway. But anyway, so I needed to find a phone. That wasn't easy to do. My mobile phone I had left in my office, but it probably wouldn't have done any good even if I had it. Most of them weren't working.
Right.
And most of the public phones were out of service too, but a few were working here and there. So I started walking in a northwest direction, and I was at a point 6 blocks due north of the site at 10:28 when I heard that horrible roar for the second time. And this time, even though there were buildings between me and the site, I knew what that meant. This meant that my tower was coming down, the north tower. So I ran to the nearest cross street and looked down. And another image that's kind of burned into my brain was this very weird sight of seeing the end of the North Tower coming down and hundreds of people running, obviously, away from the site, from my perspective, running toward me.
Right.
Probably running as fast as they'd ever run in their adult lives.
I'm sure.
Being chased by this multi-storied cloud that, because of the canyon effect in the city, was being pushed through the streets, and it looked like it was alive. It gave it the appearance of like it was chasing them. It was a very weird sight. Finally found a phone at an abandoned subway station at Canal Street. This was about 11:35, almost 3 hours after the plane hit the building, and was finally reunited with my wife. Which was a blessing, and even 20 years later is very difficult to talk about without getting very emotional.
I am sure. Again, the visuals is like certainly a nightmare. And my one question is, so when we were talking about prior to 9/11, that 8 years prior there was the bombing, were there any programs in place? Did they try to prepare people? Look, if anything like this ever happens again, like you were like the school teacher of your group, to make sure everybody got out safely before you did, or the captain of the boat, or whatever it is. Did they have any sort of training, or I just equate it to school because I'm a teacher, but
like
fire drills.
Yeah. No, that's a real good question. I would say after the bombing, they did a lot. It was kind of hard to do like an evacuation drill because 40,000 people work in those towers worked. And on any given Monday through Friday, there's another 40,000 visitors. So to have an evacuation drill, was almost impossible. But we had kind of fake evacuation drills, if you will. We did have those, and they added a lot of safety features to the building that didn't exist in the 1960s when the buildings were originally built.
Okay.
So they added all kinds more communications and reflective tape. And one of the problems in getting out after the bombing was you couldn't see anything in the stairwells.
Yeah.
There's no windows; they're just concrete, and steel. And that made things very, very slow. So they added all these safety features, some of which didn't work because of the nature of the attacks. A flying bomb is not exactly what anybody was thinking of. But there was enough in there that it made things go much quicker. We did have tenant drills, evacuation drills. For the next 13 years after 9/11, we were in temporary office space. And wherever we were, we would have real drills where we left the entire building, our Port Authority all left. And you get these really funny looks from the other tenants in the building, like, what is it with you guys? And, our response was, if you've been through what we've been through, pal,
right.
You wouldn't complain about it.
Well, Deacon, that's a question I have for you, too. Obviously, there's as things were coming, to light and you knew what was going on, and, of course, the first instinct is I have to stay alive. what was going through your mind? I mean, were you thinking that this could be it? This is the end of my life? I mean, is this something, or you were so intent on helping other people as you were and getting yourself out of there that you didn't have time to
Yeah.
stop and think about that?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I would say there was a point in the evacuation from the bombing in '93 where I really wondered, because it was one of those points where we weren't moving that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
Nothing was moving in the stairwell, so you were just sitting there and praying, or dreading, or both. And yeah, at one point then I remember thinking, I wonder if I'm ever going to see my family again.
Right.
I would say that with 2001, with the attacks, though, that really didn't happen. Again, I felt responsible for the people in my office, number one, and as you said, the adrenaline kicks in because your focus is very narrow.
Right.
We need to get out of here.
Yeah.
And things kept moving, even if they were moving slowly. They at least kept moving. So I don't really remember a time during the 9/11 evacuation where I felt like, oh, this is it for me. I've had it.
Yeah.
I also wanted to mention for the listeners that, and you mentioned it earlier in your story, that you are a docent for one of the museums there, that
Right.
it's the tours or the talks are given by people who had this personal experience. Can you just briefly, before we go, just touch on that?
Yeah, and I would like to distinguish for your listeners, too, that a lot of people assume this is the National Museum. It's not the National 9/11 Museum.
Okay.
It's a museum that was started by family members who lost loved ones on 9/11, even years before the National Museum even opened. When they saw there were visitors from all around the world coming to the site, but it was just a giant pit, and there was nothing interpretive there or explaining what happened,
Right.
So they started these tours back in like 2005, and they've continued it. It's the 9/11 Tribute Museum on Greenwich Street, about 3 blocks south of the site. And it's a very small museum, but the thing that distinguishes it are the tours. Because the tours, as you mentioned, Cheryl, are given by people who either are survivors, such as myself, first responders, or people who lost a loved one that day. And their stories are incorporated into the tours so that the tour is kind of half factual, half their experiences.
Do you see that, you also mentioned earlier, you and Rosemary and your family, you almost can't even revisit that day without getting highly emotional. And I would imagine you just grip one another, telling the story over and over. Do you want to just have some sort of holy amnesia and get away from it? Or is the retelling of it in any type of healing for you?
Yeah, I'm often asked that. I don't think I started being a docent 10 years ago on the 10th anniversary because I was looking for a way to mark the 10th anniversary that would be different. So that's when I decided to become a docent. So I've been giving tours 10 years. So now I've given my talk, hundreds and hundreds of times.
Right.
It's not cathartic for me anymore, if it even was, since I didn't start doing it till 10 years later. Some people have said, well, it's good for me to talk about it. And that was true for me in the beginning with family and friends.
Yes.
But doing the tours at this point, it's not, I don't do it for that reason. I do the tours now to commemorate the 84 colleagues who I lost that day from the Port Authority, because I am very much aware that I was, this close to being number 85.
Absolutely.
And secondly, education. I think it's very important from an educational standpoint. Now I'm doing tours where you get school kids. They weren't even alive.
Right.
That's right.
When it happened, even the college ones,
Right.
Unless they were late college. So I think it's important. I don't imagine that if you went to the Pearl Harbor Memorial at this point, there's really anybody there left who could give you a personal standpoint of what happened. So, we have a limited shelf life. until we reach the city of God. So hopefully, my thing is to the people that run these things, take advantage of us while we're here.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many people, if you look up, TripAdvisor or one of those social sites about what to see in New York,
Yes.
the reviews of our tours are always, from all people around the world, are always very touching.
Yes. Yeah.
It really is a very different experience than just going on a, who, what, where, and why type of.
Absolutely.
So maybe tell our listeners again, Deacon, where the museum is, and do they have to make reservations? Is it open a certain time each day? Or
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, because of COVID, they're still not fully. I think at the moment we're open Wednesday through Sunday. There's 2 tours a day. We were at one point doing 5 a day. I think the tours now are at 11 in the morning and 1 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken. But the website has all that information. They can go ahead and make reservations, which is appreciated by the staff, or they can just walk in for one of the tours. It's located on Greenwich Street. I'm sorry, I don't remember the number. Might be 190, maybe. Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
On Greenwich Street, 3 blocks south of the World Trade Center site.
All right.
And it's
It's called the 9/11 Tribute Museum.
yes, not to be confused with the National Museum, which is
With
right
the
on the
National Museum.
property, right? By the
Right.
Well, Deacon, we
right.
want to thank you for sharing the story. And again, tomorrow we all, again, pray for the lost souls that day and just pray things like this just don't happen anymore, that we become a much better people. So thank you for sharing that with us, and God bless you for your vocation as well.
And
Thank you so much.
go
It was a
hug-
pleasure to be here. Thank you.
go hug Rosemary just one more time. All right.
That's easy to do. I will do that.
Okay.
right.
God bless you. See you in church.
Okay, good.
Okay. Bye now.
And friends, you stay where you are. We'll be right back with more. Don't go away.
A prayer for the United States of America. Most Holy Trinity, our Father in heaven, who chose Mary as the fairest of your daughters, Holy Spirit, who chose Mary as your spouse, God the Son, who chose Mary as your mother, in union with Mary, we adore your majesty and acknowledge your supreme, eternal dominion and authority.
Most Holy Trinity, we put the United States of America into the hands of Mary Immaculate in order that she may present the country to you. Through her, we wish to thank you for the great resources of this land and for the freedom which has been its heritage.
Through the intercession of Mary, have mercy on the Catholic Church in America. Grant us peace. Have mercy on our president and on all the officers of our government. Grant us a fruitful economy born of justice and charity. Have mercy on capital and industry and labor. Protect the family life of the nation. Guard the precious gift of many religious vocations. Through the intercession of our Mother, have mercy on the sick, the tempted, sinners, on all who are in need.
Mary, Immaculate Virgin, our Mother, patroness of our land, we praise you and honor you and give ourselves to you. Protect us from every harm. Pray for us that, acting always according to your will and the will of your divine Son, we may live and die pleasing to God. Amen. At this very crucial time in our nation's history, we're inviting all of our domestic church media family of listeners to pray with us and invoke the intercession of our country's patroness, our Blessed Mother, under the title of the Immaculate Conception. If you would like free copies of this prayer for the United States of America, please go to our website, domesticchurchmedia.org, and click on the prayer link to make your request. God bless you. Well, thank you to Deacon Stephen for sharing his story, a very compelling story.
Gripping, isn't it? Just gripping.
Yeah. Now we were just saying. I know this was a prayer we played last year before the election.
Right.
But I do have maybe about 200 of these prayers. I reordered because someone had asked for bulk for their parish, so I ordered 250, and I still have some. I don't know that we have on our website the ability to request this particular prayer, but you can email us at info@domesticchurchmedia and request it, I guess, if you want it.
And that one was very, very popular. Again, it was leading up to the election. We probably had 5,000.
Right, we gave away 5,000 of those.
And they went, and people were still requesting.
Yeah.
So think back to that.
Probably need to
Countries
start praying it again.
still needs prayers, I'm telling you.
The way things are going right now, I don't know. It's
Absolutely.
people talking about the freedoms that we are having or not having, and
And the country is based on freedom. That's what makes America different from everyone else.
And
At
there's-
least that's what was.
right. But it becomes very divisive. People get, people have different attitudes towards, especially when it comes to COVID. But I was just reading. Actually, we'll play it on the way home. There's a video out by a doctor. A most recent study just came out of Israel, where they studied over 17,000 people, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Those who were vaccinated, those who are unvaccinated but had COVID, had the virus,
Mm-hmm.
and those who had one shot of the vaccine and had the virus as well.
Mm-hmm.
The study being done, and they found that in the results that people who are vaccinated are up to 27 times more likely to get the virus than those who are unvaccinated and had the virus.
Okay.
Natural immunity.
Those with the natural
And they said
immunity are
those
stronger.
those who had natural immunity plus one dose of the virus, it was a negligible difference. Didn't make any much of a difference. Just did not, couldn't even count. What was. So, natural immunity does play a role in this. We're in that category. You and I, we had the virus. So when they start talking about mandated vaccines for the unvaccinated, well, yes, we're unvaccinated, but we're also naturally immune. So, but they're not, and people are starting to wake up.
Yeah.
And why isn't the CDC at least looking at natural immunity? That's
And
the
that
question.
category, there's thousands that fit
Millions.
into that. I'm sure.
Millions.
I'm sure. Natural immunity.
Natural
and
immunity. And this study
herd
out of
immunity.
Israel, they have no agenda. There's no ties to the U.S. government or the NIH or CDC.
Nothing to gain or lose, just facts.
They just did their study, and they just released it, and found that people who are vaccinated with they tested the Pfizer vaccine, are up to 27 times more likely to get the virus if exposed to it than people who are unvaccinated and naturally immune, having had the virus. COVID recovered. So,
Well, it's got to come out. The truth will always reign, but we have to be.
because they say up to 45 to 50 million people in this country have had the virus and are naturally immune.
Right.
And, when you start mandating vaccines, it's, well, why? People who are naturally immune and their naturally immune even more immunity is even more effective than the vaccine. Why would you get the vaccine on top of that?
Well, let's equate it. Let's compare it. Have you had the measles?
Right.
So, do you take the vaccine? No, I had the
I
measles.
had the measles. That's right.
Did you have the mumps?
Yeah, I
So
had 'em.
here's a mumps vaccine.
Don't
Oops,
need it.
Sorry, don't need it. I had the mumps.
It goes go down the line.
Right.
So we'll see. We just got to pray. I just think there's and that's not we're not minimizing the seriousness of the virus itself. It's very real, and people have gotten very ill, and people have died from it. By the way, in that study, nobody died from the virus. Those who were vaccinated and got it, and those who are
Naturally immune.
and a few that did get it, the number was very low. Nobody died from it.
Right. So the vaccines are good, but it's not a cookie cutter approach.
But you have to include the natural immunity. You have to include it. And then the CDC has not yet done that. So, anyway, on that note, let's say some prayers this weekend for peace in the world and common sense and freedom
and truth.
and truth. Amen.
And thanking God for this gorgeous, gorgeous weekend. Go out to do a little extra mulching or weeding or walking or biking or rocking on the porch.
just sit in the
Whatever
sun.
it is, we thank God for many things also.
Amen. All right,
Positive.
well, we'll be back next Friday, God willing. So we'll see you then on Friday Live.
Stay well.